Let me walk you through a situation that's painfully familiar for most people. You're on your way to work, already cutting it close, when a warning light flashes on your dashboard. Instantly, your stomach tightens. You already know the fix isn't catastrophic, maybe a $300 repair. Annoying, but manageable, if you had the cash. Then reality hits. You check your account, $42. That's it until payday. So you do what millions of people are forced to do. You don't fix the problem. You turn the music up. You ignore the noise. You hope the car holds together just long enough. It doesn't. A couple of months later, the engine gives out on the highway. Now you're paying $200 for a tow. The small issue you couldn't afford to handle early has caused serious damage. The bill jumps to $2,000. And because the car is out of commission, you miss work. That's another $300 gone in lost wages. What started as a $300 issue quietly explodes into a $2,500 disaster. That isn't bad decision-making, and it's definitely not bad luck. It's math. It's the predictable cost of being cash poor. Small problems become expensive problems because you don't have margin. My name is Michael. I spend an unhealthy amount of time analyzing how money actually works. Not the motivational nonsense, but the quiet systems and hidden equations that keep people running hard and still falling behind. If any of this sounds uncomfortably familiar, if you feel like you're putting in more effort every year but your bank balance never reflects it, or if one random expense could wipe out months of progress, then this channel is for you. Stick around. This conversation matters. Because today isn't about stocks, crypto, or overnight success stories. We're not chasing shortcuts. We're talking about something far more damaging and far less discussed: why being broke is actually one of the most expensive conditions a person can live in.
Here's where most financial advice completely misses the mark. You're told that wealth comes down to discipline and that financial struggle is just the result of bad habits. So the advice sounds predictable. Stop buying coffee, cancel a streaming service, cut $10 here and $15 there, as if trimming small comforts is somehow going to change the trajectory of your life. That framing ignores a brutal economic reality. When you don't have money, everything costs more. There's a classic example that explains this better than most academic papers ever have. Imagine two people. One has money, the other doesn't. The person with money buys a well-made pair of boots for $50. They're durable, properly stitched, and last for a decade. The other person can't afford that. They only have $10, so they buy the cheapest pair available. Those boots fall apart after a season. Next year, they buy another cheap pair, and the year after that. Over 10 years, the person without money ends up spending $100, twice as much, just to keep replacing something that never works well in the first place. Meanwhile, the person who could afford quality stays comfortable and keeps the extra cash. That's not poor planning, that's the math of scarcity. When you don't have capital, you're forced into decisions that cost more over time. And this isn't some abstract idea that stopped applying decades ago. It's everywhere in modern life. Take something as mundane as toilet paper. If you've got $50 of breathing room, you buy in bulk. You go to a warehouse store, grab the big pack, and the cost per roll drops to cents on the dollar. You're covered for months. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you can't tie up $50 in household supplies. You have $4, so you buy the small pack at the corner store. Now each roll costs triple the price. Same product, higher cost, simply because you didn't have margin. That pattern repeats across rent, food, transportation, credit, healthcare, everything. This is the real math of being broke. You don't just have less money, you pay a premium for it. You're paying 2 or 3 times more for the exact same item simply because you couldn't afford to buy it the right way. That extra cost has a name, the poverty premium, and it shows up everywhere. Laundry detergent, mayonnaise, household cleaners, baby supplies, especially diapers. Anything you can't buy in bulk quietly becomes more expensive. Here's the part most people never realize. If you're broke, your personal inflation rate is higher than someone who has money. Not because prices are different, but because you're locked out of bulk pricing and economies of scale. The system charges you more for having less. And this doesn't stop at groceries. This is where it turns from frustrating to infuriating: the banking system. If you keep $10,000 in your checking account, banks treat you like a VIP. No monthly fees, no penalties, maybe a tiny bit of interest if you're lucky. But flip the situation. Say you're scraping by with $20 in your account. A forgotten subscription hits for $25. You're $5 short. Does the bank give you a buffer? Of course not. They slam you with a $35 overdraft fee. Let's be precise about what just happened. You effectively borrowed $5 for less than a day and paid $35 for it. That's an annualized interest rate north of 700%. If a private lender did that, it would be called predatory lending. When a bank does it, it's labeled a fee. Banks collect billions every year from overdraft penalties, and the vast majority of that money comes from people with less than $1,000 in their accounts. The wealthy earn interest. Everyone else pays it. That's not accidental. It's a structural transfer of money upward, hidden behind polite language and fine print. Now, I already know the objection. Just don't spend money you don't have. In theory, that sounds reasonable. In practice, it ignores how human behavior actually works. And this is where psychology enters the picture, and where the trap tightens even further. There's a term for what's happening here, and it's not a character flaw. It's called scarcity, and it does measurable damage to the way your brain functions. When someone is genuinely stressed about money, when rent is due and there's no clear answer for how it's getting paid, research shows their effective IQ drops by around 13 points. That's the same cognitive impairment as being severely sleep-deprived. Your mind shifts into survival mode. Long-term thinking shuts down. Strategy disappears. This is why financial stress produces behavior that looks irrational from the outside. People take payday loans with brutal interest rates. They buy lottery tickets. They choose fast food over cooking. Not because they're irresponsible, but because their mental bandwidth is already maxed out just trying to make it through the day. This is the deeper layer of the Boots theory. It's not just about spending more money, it's about burning more mental energy. The person who can afford quality doesn't just save cash, they save attention. They don't spend years worrying about breakdowns, replacements, or emergencies. That unused mental capacity gets redirected into learning, planning, investing, or building something better. Meanwhile, the person without margin lives in a constant state of low-level panic. Now, scale this idea up to something far more consequential than Boots: transportation. In the United States, unless you live in a handful of dense cities, a car isn't optional. It's how you earn money. Someone with savings and decent credit buys a reliable used vehicle, maybe a few years old, from a brand known for longevity. They pay cash or finance it at a reasonable rate. That car runs for a decade with basic maintenance. The total cost stays low. Compare that to someone with no savings and damaged credit. They still need a car to get to work, so they end up at a buy here, pay here lot. The dealership sells them an unreliable vehicle at double its actual value. The interest rate is punishing. By the end of the loan, they've paid several times what the car was worth, if it even lasts that long. And often it doesn't. The vehicle breaks down before the loan is finished. Now they're still making payments on something they can't drive while trying to figure out how to finance another replacement. This isn't bad luck. This is the poverty trap in full resolution. They aren't just paying for transportation, they're paying a risk surcharge. Society labels them high risk and charges them accordingly. But the only way to stop being labeled risky is to already have money, which they can't accumulate because they're constantly paying that surcharge. The same logic applies to housing. Renting versus owning is one of the clearest examples of this system at work. Rent builds no equity. It's pure expense. You're covering someone else's mortgage plus profit. But buying requires upfront capital, a down payment that feels impossible when rent is eating half your income. So you stay locked into a monthly payment that's higher than what ownership would cost, with none of the upside.
The person who can buy reduces their long-term expenses and gains an appreciating asset. The person who can't keeps paying more each month and builds nothing.
This isn't about discipline, it's about access, and until that changes, the cycle keeps repeating. When you break it down, the person without money ends up paying more every month for things they'll never actually own. That's why being poor is so expensive. You're effectively leasing your entire life. Your housing, your cash flow through interest, even your sense of stability is rented, not owned. And there's another cost most people overlook: time. Think about something as simple as doing laundry. If you have machines at home, it takes minutes of actual effort. Load it, press a button, move on with your day. But if you rely on a laundromat, you're not just paying in quarters, you're paying with hours. Travel time, waiting time, more travel time. 2 hours of your life disappear for a task that should have taken 5 minutes. That's 2 hours you can't work, can't rest, can't spend with family. And if you value your time at even minimum wage, the real cost of that laundry is massive. The same thing happens with food. In many lower-income neighborhoods, affordable grocery stores simply don't exist nearby. Instead, you get convenience stores with inflated prices. To reach a proper supermarket, you may need to take public transportation, pay fares, and lose an hour or more just getting there and back. When you don't have money, everyday life comes with more friction. Everything takes longer. Everything costs more effort. And time, ultimately, is money. When poverty drains your time, it quietly destroys your future earning potential. Now, I can already hear the pushback. This all sounds bleak. It sounds like I'm saying the system is rigged and there's no way out unless you were lucky enough to start with resources. And honestly, yes, parts of this are unfair. But ignoring the math doesn't help. Understanding it is the only way to escape it. Most financial advice jumps straight to investing. Put money in the market, aim for an 8% return. That advice assumes you're not actively bleeding cash. If you're broke, the smartest move isn't chasing market returns, it's eliminating the penalties that are dragging you down. Paying off a credit card charging 20% interest is a guaranteed 20% return. That beats any stock picker alive. Buying one reliable appliance instead of replacing a cheap one every year is a return on investment. Reducing volatility in your life matters more than chasing upside. The first step isn't getting rich, it's stopping the damage. And that brings us to the most important concept of all, the buffer. The only way to escape the cycle of buying cheap replacements is to create a window where you don't have to buy anything at all. A small emergency fund gives you that breathing room. That first $1,000 isn't boring advice, it's a shield. It's what allows you to step out of survival mode long enough to make better decisions. That first $1,000 isn't just savings, it's leverage. It's the line where the rules of the game quietly change. When you have zero margin, every problem is an emergency. A flat tire isn't a maintenance issue, it's a threat to your income. A medical bill isn't inconvenient, it's destabilizing. One unexpected charge can knock over the entire structure of your life. That's what living without a buffer really means. But when you have even a small reserve of cash, real money sitting there, untouched, the emotional math changes immediately. Problems shrink. They stop dictating your behavior. You're no longer forced into the worst possible solution just because it's the fastest one available. That $1,000 means you don't have to reach for a payday loan. You don't have to swipe a credit card at 20+% interest. You don't have to beg time from future you just to survive the present. You handle the issue, absorb the hit, and keep moving. And this is where the system flips on its head. With a buffer, you can increase your insurance deductible. And when you do that, your monthly premium drops. You're literally rewarded for having savings. The same action, an emergency expense, costs you less money when you already have money. That's the quiet advantage no one explains. That cash cushion also gives you access to scale.
You stop buying the smallest possible version of everything. You stop paying the scarcity tax. You buy household essentials in bulk. You replace once instead of repeatedly. You fix issues early when they're cheap instead of late when they're catastrophic. This is why that first chunk of savings feels almost impossible to build. You're not just saving against your income, you're saving against friction, fees, and exhaustion. You're doing it while everything around you is designed to drain you. That's why it's hard, not because you're weak, because you're fighting a stacked system. But it's also why that money is so powerful. Once it's there, you stop playing defense. You stop reacting to life like every hit might be fatal. You gain the ability to pause, and that pause is where intelligent decisions live. Now here's the part most people get wrong, and this is important. When you've been under pressure for a long time, the moment you finally get a little room to breathe, your instinct isn't to be strategic, it's to seek relief. You want to feel human again. You want a moment of normalcy. So you treat yourself. A nice dinner, a new outfit, a small indulgence that says, "I made it through." That impulse isn't a moral failure, it's a psychological response to prolonged stress. But if you give in to it too early, it quietly resets the trap. Because relief feels good now, but prevention pays you back forever. When you take that same money and use it to solve a problem permanently, something profound happens. You remove a future expense. You remove future stress. You remove future decision fatigue. Buying high-quality boots doesn't just save money, it eliminates years of attention spent worrying about replacements. Fixing your teeth early doesn't just avoid pain, it avoids time off work, emergency bills, and long recovery periods. Reliable tires don't just improve safety, they remove the risk of breakdowns that cascade into missed income.
Every durable purchase is a vote for your future stability. This is what people mean when they say, buy once, cry once. The pain is up front, but the freedom compounds. You're not buying comfort, you're buying predictability. You're buying fewer bad surprises. You're buying the ability to plan instead of react. And that's the real transformation. Not luxury, not wealth, not status. Stability. Once emergencies stop dominating your life, your mind clears. When your mind clears, your behavior improves. When your behavior improves, your finances finally start reflecting your effort. The buffer isn't exciting, it doesn't make for flashy screenshots, but it's the foundation everything else sits on. Without it, every gain is fragile. With it, progress becomes durable. This is how you stop bleeding. This is how you regain control. And this is how the cycle finally starts to break. For real. What you're really doing at this stage is paying off the poor tax so you never have to pay it again. That requires a fundamental shift in how you evaluate money. You stop asking, "Can I afford this monthly payment?" and start asking a far more dangerous question. What is this going to cost me over its entire life? The monthly payment question is a trap. It's the question lenders want you to ask because it hides reality. It compresses years of cost into something that feels manageable today. That's why dealerships obsess over it. They don't care if the car costs you $15,000 more over time, as long as the payment fits neatly into your month. Convenience masks consequence. When you focus on total cost of ownership, the illusion breaks. Interest, repairs, replacements, fees, downtime, all of it suddenly matters. You stop being impressed by affordability theater and start seeing the real numbers underneath. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. The system depends on you not understanding these mechanics. Late fees aren't accidents, they're revenue lines. Overdraft charges are forecasted income. Subscription forgetfulness is a business model. Disposable products exist because companies want you coming back again and again, paying repeatedly for something that could have been solved once. They don't want you buying the thing that lasts, they want you renting solutions forever.
The moment you start thinking in terms of durability, lifetime cost, and problem elimination, you become a bad customer. You miss payments less often, you stop paying convenience fees, you stop financing depreciation. From their perspective, you're no longer profitable. From your perspective, you're finally acting like the chief financial officer of your own life. And this is where emotion actually becomes useful if you channel it correctly. You should be angry, not at yourself, but at the math. Every late fee, every overdraft, every convenience charge is proof that you're paying extra just for being vulnerable. Don't numb that frustration. Use it. Let it harden your resolve to build liquidity, because liquidity is the only weapon that consistently beats entropy. It absorbs shocks, it prevents cascades, it gives you optionality when the system expects compliance. You are not fighting laziness, you're fighting decay, and cash is what slows decay down. So what does action actually look like here? Not speculation, not hype, not chasing the next big return. The real move is painfully simple and brutally effective. Audit your life for vampire costs. These are expenses that exist solely because you lack margin. Money you're bleeding, not because of poor judgment, but because you don't have the leverage to choose better options. Are you paying private mortgage insurance because you couldn't put enough down? Are you stuck with a high-interest auto loan because your credit was damaged by past scarcity? Are you buying household items, one unit at a time at inflated prices because bulk would strain your cash flow? Are you paying penalties, fees, or interest simply to stay operational? Find the biggest leak. Not all of them, just the biggest one. Then do something most people are unwilling to do. Cut everything else to the bone. Not halfway, not mostly, ruthlessly, temporarily, with purpose. This isn't about deprivation, it's about concentration. You're redirecting every spare dollar toward plugging the single hole that's draining you the fastest. Once that leak is sealed, the pressure drops. Once the pressure drops, saving becomes possible. Once saving becomes possible, choices open up. That's how momentum is built. Not through motivation, through structural wins. You don't fix everything at once, you fix the most expensive weakness first. Then you move on to the next. That's how the system loses its grip, not all at once, but one eliminated penalty at a time. And once the penalties stop, progress finally sticks. If you need $500 to fix your car so it stops burning oil, picking up a weekend of DoorDash or selling things you no longer need isn't just side income. It's not hustle culture. It's not grinding for the sake of grinding. It's a strategic strike against a future expense. You're not earning money, you're eliminating a penalty. That repair isn't about today, it's about preventing the next breakdown, the next missed shift, the next repair bill that multiplies because the problem was ignored too long. You're buying yourself fewer emergencies, you're buying predictability, you're buying breathing room. This is how escape actually happens, not in one dramatic leap, but one deliberate correction at a time, one pair of boots at a time. And let's be honest about something most people avoid saying out loud. This journey is unfair. The playing field is not level. Getting from $0 to $10,000 takes exponentially more effort than going from $10,000 to $100,000. At the beginning, everything pushes against you. Fees, fatigue, bad timing. The wind is always in your face. So if you've ever wondered why you're working harder but moving slower, it's not because you're broken, it's because the math is stacked against you at the start. But once you understand that poverty isn't a moral failure, it's a mathematical penalty, everything changes. You stop internalizing shame, you stop blaming yourself for being bad with money, and instead, you turn your attention to the real enemy, the penalties. You stop asking, what's wrong with me, and start asking, what is costing me the most, and how do I eliminate it? That's when the shift happens. You stop playing the game designed for you and start playing your own. You stop accepting bad loans just because they're offered. You stop paying for fragility. You stop renting solutions that should have been permanent. You buy the boots that last. You buy the right to say no to predatory interest, to panic decisions, to false urgency. And slowly, almost quietly, you walk yourself out of the hole. Not by luck, not by hype, but by removing the math that was working against you. If this video sparked something, if you suddenly realized you've been paying the poverty premium without ever being told it existed, do one thing. Share this with someone who needs it. Not someone chasing flashy wins, but someone stuck in the traps no one talks about. We celebrate success stories all the time. What we don't talk about enough are the systems that keep people stuck before success is even possible. And if this kind of breakdown matters to you, if you want honest conversations about money that don't insult your intelligence, subscribe. We're going to keep pulling apart these hidden financial mechanics until more people can afford the boots that last. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.